So I'm going to take this moment to answer a viewer question. I love your questions and your interactions so much. Thank you for that. Please keep them coming. Facebook, Twitter, Google+, on YouTube, and my website, nadiyashah.com. So Jamila asked me about, is there a type of astrology that is not based on our solar system? Like, are we aware of any other types of astrologies? And so I wanted to answer that by saying most astrologies, by far, the overwhelming types of astrologies that are practiced are geocentric. So the Earth is at the center of the universe. This is called a Ptolemaic model, essentially, of the universe, of our understanding of the world. And the main reason for that is because the astrology, on the one hand, we can say, okay, it's the technology. Up until not that long ago in human history, really, a little over 500 years ago, really we thought that the world was the center of the universe, that everything kind of revolved around us. And we can be, as human beings, sometimes quite selfish. But there's another aspect to this as well, and that is ultimately that you as the person, as the observer, are experiencing the universe. You're experiencing your environment. So it really is about what you see to a certain extent. And what I mean by that is, especially we see this in Western astrology, where the planets are calculated based on how we observe them. The planet's relationship to Earth is the basis of the calculation methods, or most calculation methods that we find in Western astrology. In Eastern astrology, it's a little bit different in Vedic astrology, and I've spoken about this in 2 separate videos that I did looking at Western and Eastern astrology, or rather Vedic astrology. In Vedic astrology, the planets are calculated based more on their position to, or their relationship to, other stars, other fixed stars. So those are 2 different ways to look at the universe, really. And if you think about it in the Western model, the person, the individual, is at the center of the culture. It is about the person, where it's not that stuff is happening out there and other people are connecting in other ways and that in some ways influencing your life. That's not what we believe in the Western world. We believe that whatever you want to make your life, you make it. You determine your reality, and you really are at the center of not only the culture, but also of your life as well. It's much more about what you want to do and then going about and making it happen. So the astrology reflects that. But this idea of like horoscopic astrology, that's very personal. When astrology first began, it was much more about what's happening in terms of the king. So what was happening in the sky spoke more to the king, not so much to individual people. And then astrology evolved, started taking the individual into account. We see that more and more that emphasized. So it remains about our perception, even as we've learned more about the universe as well, or the solar system as well. Now, there are certain placements which we can say fall outside of the solar system, and I'm thinking more of things like asteroids. And those asteroids, though, I do think in some way they still connect to our solar system, but I can understand why. Like, the planets are thought to revolve around the sun, and not all asteroids and celestial bodies actually do that. And so some techniques involve incorporating these different celestial bodies that may not necessarily revolve around the sun. For example, Pluto has a couple of moons taking place there, helping Pluto out. And in some techniques, people like to incorporate looking at what's happening with those moons. However, I am really of the belief, very much of the belief, that if you are meant to see something, if something is happening in a person's life, you should be able to see it using the basic techniques, the foundational techniques, which are essentially, whether you want to think of it as 7 planets or 10 planets, if you include the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. You should be able to see if somebody's experiencing something, and especially if it's strong, you should be able to see it within those symbols and their conversations and how they're playing out. But it's whatever calls your intuition. And I know there are a lot of astrologers out there who are amazing at working with different celestial bodies and really enjoy delving into that. And so if that's something you're inspired to do, that's awesome. There is another way of looking at the sky, and that is a heliocentric perspective. So that's sort of how we know the world to be right now. We know that the sun is at the center of our known universe, but we're discovering more and more about the universe, and I know that now they talk about the multiverse as well. So there is an astrology that puts the sun, a heliocentric astrology, that puts the sun at the center of the chart. And it's a very interesting calculation method, and it's a very new way also. There's not that much written about astrology from a heliocentric perspective, but there are certainly calculation methods out there. And I know some people who've been very fascinated by that, have enjoyed working with heliocentric charts. So looking at your birth moment and birth time, but still the center of the chart happens to be the sun. So that's heliocentric astrology. Not very common. There's not a lot out there on it. However, if you are so fascinated by it, there is information out there that can inspire you. Now, further than that, there isn't yet, but who knows? Because astrology really is a living practice. Astrology responds to the culture and the cultural environment that it finds itself in. And as such, it is constantly serving the people who need it in the way that they need it. So every part of the known world has an astrology, and they all have it reflecting what the main values of that particular time are, that culture are, and that determines a lot of what is emphasized and what might not be as well. And I do think the more that we learn about ourselves, the more we learn about the universe, the more our astrology will respond and evolve right along with us as well.